Welcome to Middle Fingers Up, the show where we hold our heads high and our middle fingers higher. I'm your host, Kieran McKay. All right, today I have the privilege of sitting down with registered clinical social worker Ashley Jones. Ashley is a mental health therapist who believes that finding solutions often involve shifting our perspectives on the problem rather than just changing the behaviors that come with the problems. She has a very collaborative and empowering approach to therapy. Ashley encourages her clients to tap into their resilience and their inner strength so that they can best explore solutions to some of the issues that maybe bring us to therapy. Ashley specializes in working with adolescents, families, and adults, really very skilled at dealing with complex mental health issues such as trauma, grief and loss, as well as behavioral and mood disorders. And the list goes on. She does a lot of high-risk work. If you go on to Psychology Today and look up Ashley Jones, you will get her full profile, a picture of what her private practice looks like, as well as all the different services that she can provide as a therapist. And believe me, there are a lot. Okay, so I'm going to welcome you. Did I miss anything in all the things?
Missed all the things. All the things, Kieran. I did a decent job. I
only did professional. I never even did anything personal stuff, you know,
yeah,
like maybe, you know, what's your favorite color or what?
I feel offended. It's not going to go well today.
Yeah, let's just start all over.
Yeah, exactly. Restart.
Yeah. Take two. Well, listen, I want to welcome you. I'm so glad to have you on today. Because, well, first of all, I feel like I have been chasing you since I started this little passion project back in November.
You have.
You were one of the therapists that I'd reached out to. Many of those, actually all of those therapists that I reached out to came on. You were the only one.
I think multiple times too.
Yeah. Some of them came on. Yeah. Exactly. Some of them have been here more than once. And you're like, I don't know, you know, maybe. But look, you're here.
I know. Thank you.
I manifested it,
you
right?
Did.
I kept putting it out, gentle reach outs.
It's only because it's you, gentle reach outs. We're getting into that side of things. Okay. That's what this podcast is about. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm really excited to talk about what we're going to be talking about today. And the only reason why I'm here is because it's you. If it was anyone else, I still would have avoided this like the plague. So I think that speaks to you as a human and your not giving up.
My persuasion.
Stick with itness. So
thank you for that. I
powers
appreciate
of
that.
Persuasion.
Yes, right? Well, it's because we go back. We go way back. We've known each other forever.
Yes.
And thank you for that. I have a lot of respect for you and the work that you have been doing in mental health as a therapist. And so part of why you're here today is just an excuse to see you, but also really to talk about, you know, like I've been noticing, and I was saying to you, an increased trend in adults around me having conversations lately. Mainly individuals are questioning whether they or their partners might be experiencing ADHD in adulthood. And I don't know, for me, it's a topic that sparked a lot of curiosity and concern because it's coming up a lot. So I don't know if that's a good thing, a bad thing, but I know that when it comes up in conversation with friends, with family, it's often, we all are not the expert of it. We don't know much about it. We just know that maybe this could be a solution to something. But before we get into that and talk a little bit about ADHD, let's start with the middle fingers up segment. So this is a little segment we do here where I ask you to share something that you want to get off your chest, something that you want to put your middle fingers up to and say, we got to pay attention to this. So I'm curious, what did you bring today?
Well, the thing that I want to put my middle finger up to is this phrase that is on topic today of, aren't we all just a little bit ADHD? Because as we will talk about at length today, I can empathize and understand with where people are coming from with that statement, but it also is and can be very harmful and hurtful to people who are struggling day to day with ADHD. And it has a minimizing factor of dismissing the very real experiences of having ADHD.
Right.
Because yes, absolutely. Everyone will have and experience some symptoms of ADHD throughout their lives. Absolutely. Because we are all humans and struggle with these things.
Yeah.
But with ADHD, it's when it's persistent, when it's consistent, when it's impacting your life on a daily basis for all of the years. And it does have really real problems for people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I appreciate that, because I know for myself personally in conversations with folks and even with close family members, even I've had conversations about that. Well, everyone is.
Yeah.
And, we've kind of gotten into it, family member and I, about that, because that is hurtful to say. And it definitely wasn't said in a way of like, well, everybody is, or aren't we all? I think sometimes people...
And nobody ever says it with the intent of harm.
Totally,
Yeah.
right? It's like when I did that fertility episode, it's people saying, oh, just be positive, you'll get pregnant. And it's like, that's not at all how that
it's
works.
not a reality for everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that too. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think because ADHD is coming up so much in our everyday conversations, it's helpful to also understand how to address it and how to talk about it and not to, underplay it. Like, simply saying, yeah, we all have it also undermines it and makes it that then there's nothing to do about it. And sure, we may all be diagnosed with it, but then what's the thing to do with that?
Yeah. What does that mean for you as an individual or society or whatever you want to take it?
Yeah. So if somebody does say, if we go back to that conversation, if somebody is having conversation and saying, hey man, like I'm going through this process, or, hey, I have ADHD, I live with ADHD. And let's say you're telling me that. And instead of me saying, yeah, we all have it. What's a better way that I can be supportive and respond back to something like that if a loved one or friend or family is telling me about it?
Well, I think the way you would respond to anything a friend and family member says, I would assume that you love and care about them. So go at it with curiosity. Oh man, that's very interesting. Tell me more about that. What's your experience with that? Oh, this is so cool. I've noticed some of these things. Tell me more. Yeah. Anything like that. Just approach it with kindness and curiosity.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And also, I like what you said about tell me what that's like for you, because then that also means we're not assuming that everybody's ADHD looks exactly the same. And it's the stereotypical, we're all impulsive people. There's more to it, right? So I like that. I like
ADHD is different for every single human.
Right.
Yes, there's different categories, things like that are more similar to different people. You can clump them together for some things, but even in that, those clumps of people, they each experience it in different ways. Right. We've all gone through different ages and stages of life, different life experiences, different everything. Right. So all of those contribute to symptoms and all of that fun stuff.
Okay, well, I really like that middle fingers up. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, that's good.
Okay, well, I'm gonna shove mine aside. So I'm also gonna join you because I appreciate that, and that's something that I will also pay attention to. In we can only fix how we do things and start with ourselves. So I will also make sure I'm paying attention to that when someone is talking to me about their experience with ADHD.
Lovely.
All right. So I have so many questions. I have, like you said, or like I've said, been chasing you. I've been wanting to sit down with you. I really appreciate that we narrow down a topic such as this, because as soon as we did, man, oh man, my head was spinning. So many questions. I asked some folks in the background some questions out of curiosity of what would they want to hear about today. So we're going to get through all that. So why don't we start with, so if we could start with a question, this is what I want to start with today. First of all, what is ADHD? We keep saying ADHD. What does that stand for? What does that mean? Can we start there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And I mean, as everybody knows, it's ebbed and flowed in legitimacy over the years. Some doctors still to this day believe that ADHD doesn't exist. It's not a thing. It's a make-believe thing. And I know many years ago, that was a common rhetoric, is that, oh, ADHD isn't real, it's just bad parenting, or kids just need more discipline, or
less sugar,
or red food dyes and things. And yes, okay, all of those things in our environment impact, absolutely. But more recent research, brain mapping, has shown differences in ADHD brains, in the way they look, in the way they interact with the rest of our bodies, and neurotypical brains. Like there's difference in brain structure. But to answer your question bluntly, ADHD is the deficit of dopamine. So in ADHD brains, they have lower levels of norepinephrine, which is connected to dopamine. So those transmitters aren't firing as much as neurotypical people. So what this means is that people with ADHD have less dopamine. So dopamine helps control the brain's reward and pleasure center.
Oh, okay.
So you ask with your eyes, what are you talking about?
Yeah. As you see, my eyebrows scrunched together.
Right? How does this make sense?
Yeah.
So it's that ADHD people, that I guess generic bouncing off the walls presentation. People with ADHD need to seek out more dopamine in their environments. Their brains need more external stimulus to function than the typical human brain. So this shows up in impulsive behaviors, in maybe riskier behaviors. ADHD people thrive more in crisis, just anything to get more of that dopamine, that pleasure hormone, that good stuff. You just need it more.
So like, give me an example. So like for someone that is not diagnosed with ADHD, so if we were to look at their brain, what levels of dopamine would be okay for me than for someone that does have ADHD and that they would need more? Like what would be like typical? Like getting on a roller coaster ride would be enough. But
I think that depends on the person, depends on the type of ADHD, depends on what else you get in your environment. How are your needs being met? Because that's all different. And the inattentive type of ADHD versus the hyperactive type, or the combination of the two, present and different needs.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that there's many different symptoms and different levels
and needs.
Okay, it's not just because people, like I find there's a lot to read about ADHD out there, and you know, when we read on something, not everything's going to be accurate, and then also how we decide to process that. If I read something online, I might take it a different way. But there are lots of articles and lots of work that out there that we have access to that allows many of us to go on and even like self-diagnose. It's like a little symptom checklist. So if there's all these levels and it's a little more complicated than as simple as saying, I have ADHD, how can we have access to these kind of checklists and these sorts of things? Like kind of, maybe you're not, maybe I need to call the internet guru and say, excuse me, like why are we putting this out there? Because I just feel like
we have all this misinformation on the internet. Can
like,
we just stop that?
Can we just talk about that for a second?
I feel like that's a bigger question than what I can provide for you, but
maybe we'll leave that. Maybe I won't ask you that. But I will ask you this. So you talked a little bit about what it is. So maybe you can give me a better example of what it may look like for someone that is getting their dopamine levels met. What do we see in kids versus what we would see in adults?
That is a good question, because it would present in, again, different ways for different people. I mean, for me, I'm an adult who was diagnosed with ADHD later in life. So, I mean, I have personal experience with all of this. So I can speak to me and my own dopamine levels. I mean, I choose a job that is high crisis. It's something different every day. I'm interacting with humans. It's unpredictable. I have small children at home. I choose to do different activities when I'm out of the house. Like I will run. I like to run half marathons. I like to do sprints. I like to get the energy out in those ways.
Right.
And all of those activities help to regulate me.
Right.
Whereas you would assume that high level of activity would make people too stimulated.
Yeah.
Whereas it helps to calm and regulate your nervous system because you just need more of it.
Yeah.
So that's why people sometimes with medications, like why would you prescribe someone who is clearly stimulated and jumping off the walls with a stimulant? Mm-hmm. It's because they require it to be able to calm.
That makes so much more sense.
And coffee. Well, we're on that one too, because coffee is a stimulant.
Yeah.
This was a big one for me and my journey in getting diagnosed with ADHD, because before I was diagnosed, I would drink a pot of coffee.
Yes.
Every single morning.
All day.
Yeah. And up until afternoon. And I needed it to feel calm. I needed it to regulate myself. I didn't realize it at the time. I was like, ooh, all the coffee. Yum, yum, yum. It wasn't until I started taking Vyvanse, which is a stimulant medication, that I don't need coffee anymore. Because I'm getting that need met through proper medication.
Right.
And now I'll still drink coffee. I'll drink 1 or 2 cups. Mm-hmm. And I don't think about drinking more of it. I don't, like, it's just, it's built into the routine now. I enjoy it. It helps still.
Yeah.
But I'm not finding that I need to drink an entire pot of coffee to function in a day.
See, that's interesting because it goes back to what you were saying about everyone has their own experience. Yep. And so when you describe something about coffee, I've never heard that, never thought of that. I've known you for so long and know that about you. You can really drink that full pot. She's not lying. Mm-hmm. Like the office kind, the gross office style too.
Yes.
Which is so funny. Yeah, because I guess your point makes so much sense in terms of like everybody has sort of their own thing that maybe we try to fill in with or go to a little more than the other, like you said, exercising and those kinds of things.
Yes.
Is there anything, before I ask you the next question, anything else about what is ADHD that you want to add?
I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. Other stuff will come up as we go.
Yeah. Okay, so how would you say, if we talk about recognizing ADHD in adults, how does ADHD manifest differently in adults compared to children? Mm-hmm. And you sort of covered that right now. Mm-hmm. But the next part to that, if you want to add a little bit more about the difference, you can. But also, like, why is it often overlooked in adults? Mm-hmm.
So with this, I want to specifically focus on females with ADHD, because I think that, well, for one, this is an area I'm very passionate about. We've done a very big disservice to females and girls with this diagnosis, because there have been a lot of people like myself who have grown up and had experiences as kids and it's been minimized or blamed on something else.
Yeah.
So with females and ADHD, it presents totally different than the little boy jumping off the walls.
Yeah.
It often, that hyperactivity is internal. So often you feel that motor running all the time. You can't sit still. You can't sit and watch a full movie. You have to get up. You have to do something. You always have to be going. Mm-hmm. And the thing with this is that it's often misdiagnosed in women and girls as anxiety. Mm-hmm. And it's so much easier. Oh, yeah, she's got anxiety, depression are the two combos. Yeah, we'll just label that for that teenage girl and move on. Not even an idea that it could be ADHD. And yes, ADHD comorbidity with anxiety, depression. Yes, those three often happen together, but they're very different as well in different people. And that's why it's been misdiagnosed. Social norms as well is because little girls are chatty. Oh, she's just chatty. She's just really chatty. Oh, she's just dozing off into space. That's fine. That's just what she does. Right. And I think these misconceptions put women and girls into these boxes and that need to perform to societal standards that leads to masking and leads to minimizing our own symptoms and our own experiences to fit in. And that's also what leads to misdiagnoses, because lots of women go do the screeners for ADHD and they minimize their own symptoms. They dull it down because they want to hold themselves to a higher standard, that perfectionism, that, oh, no, that's not me, that's something else.
That's the stigma right there.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah. That was very, very helpful, first of all, I just want to say. And I also want to go back to just girls and boys, because how you talk about that, I'm a mom of 2 boys, and that is exactly how my world is. My boys are everywhere all the time. I actually have received a phone call towards the end of the school year from my youngest, from the teacher officially saying, we've been talking all year, officially saying, I really recommend you getting an ADHD assessment. And so we're having conversations, starting this process, figuring out stuff. And so it's easy to see that within him. I mean, there's some things that, without really knowing a whole lot about ADHD, other than what I know through my work, you know, you see some symptoms, you see some things, kid bouncing off the walls, can't finish a task, the stereotypical things that those of us that know the most about it, that's what we know, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. Then you see little girls. And you see little girls that can finish tasks. You see little girls that do all their coloring and finish all their things and do all the things little girls are supposed to sit down and do. And right here, right now, I would so drop the Barbie movie if anyone has seen it. You know what I'm talking about, with America Ferrera's speech that she gives. Have you seen the Barbie movie?
I haven't, no.
Oh, okay. When you go see it, you're going to remember this part of the conversation, just like what girls are meant to do and not to do at the same time. Right? So what do you think that means for young girls or young people in terms of this being misdiagnosed? Like, are they managing? Because you're saying it's internal. So that also means like we can't really see. If I had a little girl, my daughter, if this is the case, her trajectory that maybe she may need to be diagnosed with ADHD, what can I be looking for? What could I be paying attention to? How can I be helpful if I'm around my kid or maybe a teacher in a classroom or someone? Because then I'm going to get into my next question, which is what is like the worry of what do these little girls grow up, and you then you're the adult version of that maybe you can get into. So the first part of my question was just about why do we think that's being missed? I guess is the question.
Those preconceptions of what we think ADHD is or should be, and the guilt and shame and wanting to fit in and wanting to belong in these experiences of young girls, and that shame around not understanding what's going on in school, but I can't speak up because then I'm going to be labeled as chatty, or I need to act and present as a certain way, so I'm going to minimize symptoms. I'm not going to tell people what my experience is. So then it is all internal, and that's what leads to low self-esteem, negative self-worth, all that negative self-talk, inner dialogue. But one of the most damaging things about this and not catching that diagnosis early is that masking. Young girls, young women develop a mask that they put on to function in society. So they have inner scripts, they have inner dialogues, they cope, they learn how to cope with these symptoms by masking them.
Like multitasking as a server?
Correct. Absolutely. And I mean, a lot of people with ADHD gravitate towards those crisis jobs, like EMT, doctors, therapists, or children's mental health, or any of that's fast-paced serving. Yes, you see lots of men and women in that industry with ADHD. For one, we're really, really good at it. We thrive in doing 1,000 things at the same time and getting them all done eventually. Maybe not in the sequence that people would like us to, but it does get done, and it meets all the needs, and we're great at that. But as a little girl, it's hard sometimes, or being the one who is boisterous and says and does weird stuff, and because that was me, that was my experience. I was more of the little boy ADHD looking back, and just never feeling like you fit in or belong because you're weird and you're quirky and you say things that you don't mean to say and you blurt it out, which is actually probably one of the reasons I was avoiding this, because I still do this as an adult. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say that I'm going to regret? But all of that. And then what the masking does is that you grow up into an adult who has masked their entire life, that you've learned how to chameleon, how to parrot other people and be the person that you think they want you to be.
Yeah.
So you're great at being this type of a person in front of that type of a person. But then you lose yourself.
Yeah.
And you wake up and you're 30 and you have no idea who you are. You don't know what you prefer. You don't know what you want. You don't know where you want to go. You don't know what you need because you're so focused on other people's because it's easier. And then you're lost and isolated and alone. And all of that comes crashing down on you. So that's really the risk of not diagnosing and finding this sooner.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine maybe we can jump into, because that's a very helpful way of sharing what maybe the process was like for you, because you're saying you were diagnosed later, and when you look back, there were signs. Now that you know, there were signs that were missed along the way. Family, school, all sorts of things happen. As a parent, that's our biggest fear, that we're going to miss these things. We don't catch them, right? Yeah. But then I think we don't catch them because, like you said, we make rationale and reasons for, excuses. Oh, she's just quirky.
Yes.
Oh, she just can't sit through a movie because whatever the reason is. But missing some of those points that could all be leading to this diagnosis, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. So what are some other misconceptions about ADHD in adults, and maybe how can we debunk them if possible?
I'm at a different point with ADHD that I've learned and experienced it from a different lens, like as a therapist, working with clients, having experiences as a kid, all of this. So maybe what you can do to help me, what are some misconceptions that come up for you?
One that I've heard, that I've been in conversation with, is if I think I have ADHD, I should go to my family doctor and seek a diagnosis at my doctor's office. Is that what I should do? Because that's what people do.
Yes. And full disclosure, that's what I did.
Okay.
I am a mental health professional and have more experience in this aspect. So, it wasn't just looking things up on Instagram and relating.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you do go into your family doctor, you do the things, it's not just a checklist that you print off the internet. They'll do an assessment. They'll have conversations with you. They'll do their due diligence. And if they say, yeah, you fit the criteria for ADHD, great. If you don't, you don't. It all depends on who you talk to as well. But for me personally, that doesn't matter. It's about if you feel inside that there is something wrong, that there's something going on that's making it hard for you to go through life, you need to talk to someone about it. And if the easiest way to do that is your family doctor, then great.
Okay.
I've had the experience where family doctors will diagnose ADHD or they won't. Either way is fine.
So it's okay for a family doctor to diagnose?
In my opinion, absolutely.
Okay.
Because really, the only thing the diagnosis provides is, in terms of the doctor, the ability to medicate or not, or the rationale for it. You don't have to medicate if you have ADHD. For me,
that's another misconception.
Yes, you don't have to.
I don't want to know if I have ADHD because I don't want to go on meds.
Yeah, and that's fine. You absolutely do not have to.
So you can say or in your profession at least, of people that are living with ADHD and not on medication.
Several, many. It's a personal choice. I've seen people, personal, professional, that do well with ADHD medication. I've seen some that don't. I've seen some that go on it and choose to go off it and then back on it. It's all personal choice.
It sounds like it's a process also.
Yes.
There's not just, now that I know I have ADHD, the next step is linear in that I'm going to get meds and then I'm cured.
Yeah, it's not a conveyor belt.
There's right. So
that's a misconception.
The meds cure you.
Yes. That is so
That's not true.
False. This is not. You can't just cure something going on in your brain. And the thing about stimulant medication too is that it doesn't have to build in your system. You take it in the morning and it wears off. It's out of your system by the evening, which is really fun for ADHD because you hit a witching hour where your meds wear off and man, shit gets crazy. But
reminds me of parenting at bedtime when my kids were little.
Yes, exactly. You just hit that and it's like, oh, I should have got them to bed 5 minutes sooner.
I should have gone for a walk 5 minutes before their bedtime and, let Carrie
They're
deal with
overtired now.
Yeah.
No, they're crazy.
Yeah.
It's like Gremlins. Movie, right? Yeah. Like, but that's exactly
so like
it.
when it wears off, it's like the witching hour.
Yeah. And then it's you feel those symptoms kind of sneak back in. But even on the medication, you still have to deal with everything that comes up with ADHD. So the lack of focus, the difficulty with organization, the wandering into a room and forgetting why you did it, looking at your hand and you're holding something and you forgot why you were doing that. Those things don't go away because you're taking your medication. Medication kind of calms and slows the motor. So you don't feel as anxious, overwhelmed, that impending doom, the worry, the too overstimulated.
Yeah.
It provides you with more of the calm so that you're more able to deal with all the other stuff. It just increases the capacity to manage everything else.
So it's like a tool to help you, almost like a strategy.
Yeah.
Like breathing would be, or a grounding exercise would be, the medication is there, but you have to do the work. You have to do the focus. You have to write your list out if that's what you need, or whatever little things that help you. But the medication is sort of allowing you to then be able to plan.
Yes. It provides you access to those different areas of your brain that can help with managing all those other symptoms.
Right.
For some. For some, it doesn't provide that. And varying levels and all of that fun stuff.
So so just back to one of the other misconceptions is like, people think, okay, I'm crazy. And what are we going to, like, your life is kind of over. You can't be successful with work and all those things. Honestly, I personally hear the stigma and all that, but I understand. So are you crazy if you have ADHD? Like, you have it, so are you crazy? Is that,
well, I mean, you can ask my friends and loved ones. They'd probably say yes. But
I'm going to ask you, because we all know how we feel when we say I'm crazy.
Yeah.
We've all had our own times in life.
Yes.
And so you tell me.
And I think on that note, it's self-awareness. It's that understanding yourself in a different way. And I think everyone can relate to, like you're saying, those points in your life where you feel like you're going crazy. Nothing is manageable. You don't know yourself. You don't know what's going on. Everything is so much harder than it once was, or than you think it should be. Those moments are that lack of self-awareness. So for me, that was one of the biggest pivotal moments with this ADHD diagnosis, is that it helped me realize that this what's happening for me, my experiences, everything, looking back, wasn't something bad. It wasn't me continually screwing up. It wasn't this flawed trait in my personality. It wasn't that I wasn't trying hard enough, or that I wasn't good enough, or that everything is just going to be so much harder for me for no reason. It gave me that understanding of, oh, okay, everything makes sense now. It doesn't change that I'm still a hot mess in so many of these areas. Those are still there. But instead of me shitting on myself, thinking that I'm a horrible person and that I can't do anything, I'm like, no, that's my brain. My brain doesn't function in the neurotypical way that others do. And that's okay. But now it's my responsibility to figure out, how does my brain work? How can I get it to work in these ways? I can't just say, it's my ADHD. I'm allowed to act like an asshole.
Right.
No, but it's that understanding of, oh, this is why I interrupt people. This is why I share these stories about myself when someone else has shared it about them. It's the way we connect with others that people think is rude, because I've just shared this really intimate, hard thing. And instead of saying things about me, you decide to share a similar personal experience of yourself. Like, are you trying to one-up me? What are you doing here? People don't understand it.
I literally just posted a little post about that last week, because I'm finding that I can be better at doing that less. I witnessed two people role model so well for me how they didn't do that.
Yes.
I shared something personal and they both responded in a way that was just being there with me and saying very little, but being there without being like, oh yeah,
one time for me,
when I had the flu or whatever.
But it's not neurodivergent people being jerks.
Yeah.
It's the way we know how to connect with others. It's our way of saying, I get you, I understand, because I've been there.
Right.
And that was something that I didn't learn until very recently. I didn't realize it is something that I do, or that it was something that people can get offended about.
Yeah.
And recognizing that side of it, I'm like, oh, okay. Completely unintentional. I didn't realize that people were perceiving me in this way.
Yeah.
So those little things make way more sense once you figure out what's going on with your brain.
Yeah.
It's not me being an asshole. It's my brain needing to understand social cues in different ways.
Yeah. I think that's so helpful, because I'm thinking for people that may be listening and maybe going through some of their own journey of, maybe do they need a diagnosis with ADHD? Maybe they have one, maybe they're trying to learn about a loved one or what. I think the way you share that experience is so helpful, because people as individuals, you're right, have so many different ways of communicating. And whether we have ADHD or not, I think it's so helpful when we can step back and look at the way we interact with people and like, yeah, how can I be better at this? Or maybe my loved ones don't like it when I joke about something serious or whatever it is that we do that we think should be good, but it's not, right?
Yes.
I think that's just in general a really good example of how to build self-awareness and doing a check with ourselves and maybe with loved ones. Like, oh yeah, that's good to know that that bothers you when I do that.
Yes.
Because you're right. Most people do that to connect. That is why people always mean well, but then we take them, we personalize it, and we don't take it so well, right?
Yes.
There's Ashley. She's always got to one-up us.
Exactly. Oh, she always has to make it about herself.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Classic.
I promise I'm not trying to do that.
It's fine. I've known you for a long time. Personally, I've never experienced that, but we also knew each other in the professional setting.
Yeah.
So
do you know why that is? It's the mask.
Oh.
I've been able to mask so well that when people start to get to know the real me, that weird, quirky, inappropriate side comes out more and more.
Yeah.
But the mask makes it so easy for you to shut off from all of those weird quirks or the things that make you different, so that you can present yourself in a way that you think other people want. And then you get validation from society that, okay, yeah, this is the way that people want you to act. So it makes it easier to compartmentalize or to not bring up other things, because you're able to shut off parts of your brain in different ways so that you can survive and cope and exist in society.
I mean, that sounds very exhausting.
It's very exhausting. And that's why often, going back to the kid thing, that is a common thing with people with ADHD, is that it's, especially little girls, is that it's so exhausting. putting on that mask, managing these symptoms, coping, being someone you're not, every hour of every day when you're outside of your house, that the second you get home from school, you're exhausted, you're irritable, you are angry, you respond in all of these ways that parents are like, what is going on with you?
With my devil child.
Yeah, like you are a perfect student. We get no calls from school. You all of these things, but then you come home and you're this hot mess. Like you're a jerk or you're tired or what is going on? So many little girls are like, I don't know. And then all of the emotions and all of the things come out.
And then it becomes about behavior. You're just you're being defiant.
Yes.
You're and girls are just so smart with the mind games as it is. So it's like you're manipulating me.
Yes.
You're a master manipulator.
Yes.
Watch out for her. She manipulates and lies.
Yes. Whereas they're like, what? I don't know. Or lying or stealing or taking things. It's that idea, like with lying and parents and kids, that's one of my things that I'm like, I don't even want to talk about this. Because lots of times people with ADHD, it's not so much that you're lying or doing it purposefully to be manipulative. It's that sometimes you just forget or you don't remember or it's hard to recall certain things. So you say, I don't know. Like, well, you do know. Tell me why you did it. They actually might not know or remember or have any idea of what you're talking about. So catching someone in a lie, I hate that so much.
Yeah, because there's so much more to it.
Yes.
Than just the simple.
Yeah. And it's that idea of, going into conversations with curiosity instead of judgment. So important.
Right.
Because you don't know.
Yeah. Right. And even like instead of focusing on the fact that you lied to me or didn't tell me, it's also like, as again, when we do the self-awareness, recognizing it's really important to me when you tell me this thing that I ask for, or let's find a way to write it out next time because I really need to know, or we said we'd meet up and we didn't, like whatever it is. It's because I think sometimes, we want the other person to do what works for us. To me, it's important that you tell me this thing, but you're not necessarily lying. So I think, I bet living with ADHD, I would imagine, means that you get in all sorts of communication fumbles.
Yes. Communicating is hard. I mean, at the best of times, but it has different struggles, obviously, for everyone experiencing ADHD in different ways. But it can be confusing and hard to read or misunderstand social cues, to understand your symptoms, to understand the ways in which it could impact relationships with others. Yeah,
which I'd like to get into in a little bit. And maybe what we'll do is if there's any other misconceptions that come up along the way, we can address them.
As they pop into my head.
Yeah.
They'll pop out of my mouth.
You've also at this point shared some typical symptoms that maybe most of us that only know a little bit about ADHD would know, that impulsivity, bouncing off the walls. And you've also been very clear about everyone's symptoms are going to look different. So everyone does not have the same symptoms. However, and I know I kind of asked this earlier, but maybe we can go back to it again. What are the typical symptoms of ADHD in adults, or something in particular that individuals and their loved ones can identify or like look out for? Or if someone's listening today and think, not to go back to that everyone has ADHD thing, right? But like if someone's listening and thinking, like kind of when Ashley talks today, I wonder about my partner, I wonder for me, or that's sort of my journey as a child. If someone's wondering, like, is there something that we can look for or think about that would make us want to go to the doctor and have that conversation about ADHD?
Absolutely. I think one of the most important parts to that is that if you're ever thinking or wondering of, is there something wrong with me? Or I feel like this going through life is harder than it should be, go talk to your doctor about it. It could be ADHD, it could be anxiety, it could be nothing. But if you're feeling like something's missing, it doesn't hurt to go and talk about it or get more information or try different things.
Yeah.
Or even honestly, if you think you have ADHD, looking up different strategies that help people with ADHD and trying them.
Yeah.
If they work, they work.
Right.
That is great. Right. If they don't, they don't. That's fine too. But you don't need that diagnosis to try different things in your life.
Yeah.
Right. Like if one of your friends is like, oh, I tried this in my life and it really helps me. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to go try it, or you might not,
right.
if you want to or not. But some of the other kind of symptoms, I mean, misplacing things often, or if you're someone who has to do 4 or 5 trips to the car every morning because you get to your car and you remember, oh, I forgot my lunch. Go back into the house, grab the lunch, get back to the car. Oh, I forgot my water bottle. Going back into the house, getting the water bottle.
Sunglasses.
Coming back, sunglasses. Yep. And your brain just doesn't click into it when you're in the house, in the room. Those things could be right beside each other.
Right.
But you're blind to it until you get to the car and it's like, oh, shoot.
Yeah.
My one thing right now is that my oil change indicator in my car is there. It's telling me I have 15%. So now I know I need to call. But what I do instead is every time I get in my car, I say, I need to call. I press the button to get rid of that. Completely gone. Completely forget about it until the next time I'm in my car.
Right.
I'm like, every time. And coming here today, I'm like, I did it again. And I will. The second I leave here and get into my car, I will not call to get my oil changed.
So what
it
is
won't
that?
happen.
What is that?
ADHD. It's that
but like
inattentive piece.
Is there anxiety behind that? Like does it feel like anxiety that, oh, I have a task to do? Is that part of it?
No, sometimes, but it's just your brain gets the information and literally forgets it immediately. Lots of times it's the introducing yourself to someone, they say their name, you shake the hand, it's gone.
Yes.
That name is gone. It's out of your life forever.
I know people that have that struggle all the time.
Yes.
They have to have a strategy to like connect this person to something.
Yes. And if you're experienced, it doesn't mean you have ADHD, but it's just one of those common things.
Yeah.
Or if you're often playing charades to describe a word that you can't recall. It's a very common word, like fork.
Yeah.
And you're like, can you please pass me the thing the tool you use to shovel food into your mouth? I'm looking at it. What is that? And then the person beside you is like, that is a fork, you idiot. And it's like, yes, but your brain just can't retrieve that word in that moment.
Right.
Another fun one is memory, like memories from childhood or memories of experiences with other people. This is a common one for me. I just don't have these memories. People will be like, oh, do you remember that time 8 years ago when we went to that restaurant, when we were on vacation there, and there was that song playing and we had that salad? And I'm like, dude, I don't even remember going on vacation with you.
Like, who are you?
Ever. Yeah. And I'm like, did we meet before this moment? Like, what's your name? Like, let's step it back a bit. But those things just are gone out of your head.
They don't,
That's that idea of object permanence. This one's also a fun one too.
Yeah.
Is that objects or people or experiences don't exist unless they're right in your face. And this is a personally a sad and hard one in terms of relationships, is that if someone isn't texting me or isn't immediately relevant in my life, I could love them. I can care about them so much.
Yeah.
But if they're not there present in that moment, they don't exist. I forget people exist.
Right.
This happens with my sister who lives in America.
Mm-hmm.
I forget to reach out. I forget she exists until she texts. And then I'm like, oh, right, this is a human I care about.
And let me guess, her text is, did you forget about me? Like,
you would think,
excuse me, hello.
Yeah, you would think, but she also just got recently diagnosed with ADHD.
You guys relate.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's that you lose people in your life because you can't keep in touch with them. It doesn't happen, and then people get offended.
Yes.
I'm lucky that I have amazing humans in my life that don't let me do that. I do that to you. That's actually probably
why it's taken 100 years to get you here.
Is that I'm like, oh shoot, right, Kieran exists.
The answer was always yes.
Yes, but it's just like, oh right, I forgot that this was a thing that existed. Or items in a house. What I like to do when I clean up is if I don't know exactly where the things live, I put them all in one bag. and I hide them in a closet or a room somewhere, and I just forget they exist.
Right.
So if you came to my house, it would look immaculate until you found that one closet or the one room that has everything, and I forget it exists until I walk into it and I'm like, shit, I need to do something with this.
Right.
And then I don't, and then it's fine. So that anxiety piece often isn't there.
Right.
Because I forget things exist.
Yeah.
Movies. Movies. I forget the plot to movies all the time.
Oh my gosh.
Books.
Yeah.
So I can reread and rewatch movies. I'll be watching a movie that I didn't realize I've seen before until I get to the end and I'm like, oh, I've seen that before. This is probably the 4th time I've seen that movie. Didn't remember it. So it has some benefits.
Yeah. It has some benefits.
Are nice. Yeah.
But I would imagine, like you said, you know, I mean, I know we're going to talk about relationships in a minute.
Yeah.
But when we get there, that's what I'd like to cover is that impact that can have. Because you said people, not in a professional place, but in a personal place that can impact you.
Yes.
So we're going to get to that in a second. I just want to go back. Earlier on, you had mentioned, and this is sort of why I brought up the anxiety piece, that people get misdiagnosed with anxiety or depression, and it may have been ADHD. Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I also hear that from people that are wondering about ADHD, but are saying they do have diagnosis with depression and or anxiety. And so often, and I've read some things too where it overlaps and they look like they're the same, but maybe they're not.
Yes. And sometimes you can have all 3 of them together. But the thing with ADHD is that there's, and not everyone experiences this, but a lot of people do, is something called ADHD burnout, where you're really hyper-focused or you're really on. You can do all of the things. Like you just feel like, yes, okay, now my brain is focused. I can do 1,000 things at once. I can take all the tasks on. So you overcommit to people, you overcommit at work, you take on way more than any human can do until you can't. You become way too overwhelmed. You start doing the things, but realize it's impossible. You can't finish any of them. And then that impending doom kicks in and your body turns off, you completely shut down, you go numb, you can't do anything. You feel crappy about yourself, you know, you're sitting on the couch staring at a wall, you know you need to be doing things, but there is nothing in your power that you can do to go do those things. So you feel sad, you feel crappy about yourself, you have pessimistic thinking, all the things that are counteractive to when you're on. So this cycle often happens in varying degrees of intensity and severity for people, but when you're on, that can be presenting as an anxiety. Like I can do all these things, you're jittery, like you've got the motor going and you start having all these thoughts and feelings happening all at once. So that could be misconstrued as anxiety, or those lows when you've taken too much on and your body just shuts down. That can be seen as depression. And that's why it's harder, I would say, for when you have those additional diagnoses as well, because it is worse. It is harder to manage. And there are more things going on.
Well, I would imagine then physical symptoms also would come out, and also pain in certain parts of your body as well, because how do you keep all that in there?
Yes.
As we already covered, it's very exhausting as it is.
More prone to headaches, more prone to ignoring your body. Is also another common experience amongst people with ADHD, is that you minimize or aren't aware of physical symptoms in your body. So it's either combination of a couple different things, but it's sometimes you're so used to masking and ignoring your own needs and your body's needs that you actually don't realize pain in your body until it's really bad and you're in the hospital. Another part of that is the intense need to people please and putting everybody else's needs above your own, because it's easier. It's easier to do that and ignore your own needs because you want to fit in, you want to be liked, you want to belong. So you do the people pleasing thing to the point of, oh yeah, like it feels like there's something wrong with my appendix, but I don't want to inconvenience the doctor. What if I go and it's actually nothing?
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to sit and suffer with this because I don't want to burden other people. I'm worried about being too much.
Wow.
So you ignore it and then you're in the hospital and people are like, why didn't you go sooner? And it's like, I just didn't feel like that was an option. I just wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
So that's also a thing that happens, which is super fun. Pain tolerance is usually higher for this reason.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy that, that all that's being put before taking care of your own basic needs and the cycle that one would be in going through that.
Yes.
Hence the exhaustion, hence the not getting the tasks done because I'm pleasing people and all these sorts of things sort of work against each other, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And on that note too, with women and ADHD, there are connections with when your estrogen levels decrease, your ADHD symptoms increase. So during your cycle, during that time of the month, often women experience the symptoms of ADHD so much more because it's connected with estrogen. So this is another reason for women, girls, being diagnosed with ADHD in different ages and stages of life. Going way back, I think, to a question you asked at the start of why now in adults? Is it something that has always been there? Is it something that's not? Or things like that? I don't even know if you asked that question.
Well, you and I talked about before as well, is exactly that, which was because I'm noticing so many adults now are talking about it. So is it, like I said to you earlier, I was like, just in the most respectful way, someone has a peanut allergy. When I was young, I've always had this allergy, but I also know people that inherit allergies later on in life. And I know people that grow out of it, right? That have had it. So ADHD has come on in this kind of wave to me that we're all of a sudden, we're talking so much about it. So that's where my question and concern is like, what are we missing? Are we missing something, or is it just it comes up? So this sounds like part of it is misdiagnosing.
Yep.
But also there's a hormonal connection to it too. If your estrogen levels are, and women that are in their 40s that start to go through perimenopause and all that sort of stuff, right? With estrogen levels depleting. Yeah. That's what happens.
Changing, yeah.
Then I would imagine maybe you're noticing a lot more of these maybe symptoms. No, I know you're not a doctor, but do you know where the connection? Like why?
No idea. No idea. I've not gone further into that.
That's fucked up, man.
It is.
Like,
it is.
You're already having to deal
right?
with all this other stuff, and now you're like, oh, by the way, maybe you need to look at the ADHD too, possibly.
Because chances are you probably did have ADHD your whole life, but you were able to cope and manage it in a way that it wasn't a big deal.
And like you said, mask it.
Yes, and mask it or not. Yeah. Like sometimes the symptoms might not be that intense, that you're able to cope in ways that's not exhausting, so it's not a big deal.
But do they need to be intense?
They do, in the sense of it impacting your life.
Okay.
Like if you're going throughout your day and your life and everything's okay, it's manageable. You're not exhausted. You're not questioning yourself every single day and you're fine and coping.
But are those of us, those people that are fine and coping, are they maybe also self-medicating? Because I also know a lot of us adults that love smoking weed, love drinking, maybe dabbling in with mushrooms. There's a lot of psilocybin, all that sort of stuff happening, right? Microdosing. And then of course there's always the extreme drugs and stuff that I know of but don't know of. I wonder sometimes, like, are people then that have been misdiagnosed or told live with it, you're fine, it's okay. And then as adults I need that drink, I need those couple of drinks, I have to drink every day, I have to smoke weed every day, I have to do this thing every day.
Absolutely, yes. And there's lots of studies out there and connections between neurodivergent people are more susceptible to substance use for all of those different reasons. But lots of times it's that, I need to have a drink or two in order to go socialize, or in order to be accepted, or in order to turn on that charm or that person, because that's another misconception with the extrovert presentation of ADHD.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I legitimately thought and believed I was an extrovert. Everyone in my life who knows me would be like, yeah, of course you're an extrovert.
Yeah.
I'm not. I recharge alone.
Yeah.
The pandemic, COVID, I loved it because it gave me an excuse not to be around humans.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that that's what being an introvert is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a trained extrovert because, and yes.
You're a pleaser.
Yes, I'm a pleaser.
People like that part of you.
I am also quirky and weird, and I am loud, and I am inappropriate in social situations, which is extroverted ways as well. But it's, different ways to recharge.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't have to just be extroverted. I can be introverted too.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be those things.
And, like a lot of what we're talking about today, well, a lot of that is about ADHD and recognizing and diagnosing this in adults. And part of that is your own personal experience and some of it is professional.
Yes.
So that's part of what we're saying. However, some of what you're also saying, I feel can resonate for any and every one of us that aren't in the sort of path of figuring out if I or a loved one are possibly living with ADHD. It's also that self-awareness you're talking about too. It's like recognizing the things that deplete us, recognizing the things that we're masking to please someone or help someone, but it's not really benefiting me personally. And so like, again, where are you getting all that extra energy from if you think this is what your friends or your job or your family or whoever you think may need that? And so it sounds to be a lot of that validation coming from the outside. So if these people are okay, if they're having fun, or if they love this thing I'm doing with them, then I'm okay.
Exactly.
And you're the last one then to that. Hence the story of the person in the hospital when they need to be operated on versus going in sooner.
Yes, and those preventative measures. And that's where that self-medication comes in those times when you're alone and by yourself. And sometimes people with ADHD find it really hard to be alone and by yourself because those are the times that you start to realize, okay, who am I? What do I want? Where do I want to go in life? What are these decisions that I need to start making for myself? Those become overwhelming because for so long you've masked and you've put other people's needs first that you lose yourself, you lose your identity, you lose who you are. And that's scary. So then often people do turn to drugs or alcohol so they don't have to think about that stuff. They don't have to address it.
Right.
But obviously it just makes it worse.
Yeah.
And it compounds and it just pushes it off to the next day.
And would you say it eventually catches up?
For sure.
Yeah. And what
For a lot
may
of
that
people
look like?
Destroying relationships, blowing your life up, moving across the country, changing jobs, switching things up, or any of those things too. Anything to avoid or to address or, do something new, do something crazy.
Right.
Get tattoos and piercings.
Yeah. Right.
Change your hair.
Yeah. Oh my God, the 20s.
Right? Exactly.
So
what can I do?
So let's talk then about ADHD and relationships. So that's kind of what we're getting to. How would you say ADHD impacts relationships? You talked a little bit about that. But I'm talking about like romantic partnerships and these intimate relationships we have with friends and family dynamics. How can, any normal human would say their family is the best reality show TV out there. We all have drama. We all have issues. How can living with ADHD add to that drama and those family issues or partnership issues with your spouse?
All of the things. Well, I mean, the forgetfulness is often a hard thing. Time management, time blindness is a very real thing where you think you have 10 minutes so you can complete this task, which is unrealistic to complete that task in 10 minutes. But then you start the task, you get hyper-focused in the task, you forget other things exist, and you were supposed to go and clean the toilets and bathrooms. Right. And then your partner gets upset with you because the one thing you were supposed to do, they find you doing something else. Or those activities, where you walk into a room and you're like, okay, I'm going to do the dishes. You start doing the dishes and then you realize you don't have soap. So you go to the laundry room and you get the soap, the dish soap. Then you realize, oh, there's the laundry on the floor. So you put a load of laundry in. But while you're doing that, you have to clean the vent. You go to the bathroom, you put that lint in the garbage, and then your kid comes up and says, hey, can I have a snack? Yes. You go get the kid a snack. You realize you forgot to eat all day. You start to make yourself a sandwich, but then you realize you left your headphones upstairs because you wanted to listen to music. You stop making a sandwich. You go get your headphones, but then you get distracted and you forgot to shower. So then instead of finishing your sandwich, you go in the shower, and the people are like, what are you doing? And then at the end of the day, you have all these half-finished things. That could be very, very frustrating.
Wait. Aha. We'll make sure that shows up.
Right.
That made me want to cry and also like hug you and also understand a lot of people in my life like all at once. Because you're like, that is probably a day in the life for so many people.
Yes.
But it just, okay, so because it's so in the day in the life for so many people, then it becomes so normal.
Yes.
That's okay. And because people make a way to live like that.
Yes. And cope with it and all of those things.
But maybe if we dig a bit deeper, we're not actually coping and living with it. We're finding ways to just on the surface deal. But when we dig a bit deeper, like how are our relationships with our loved ones? Because now you're saying, my loved one asked me to go do that bathroom, but it looks like I don't care
because I'm showering instead.
Yeah, it looks like I'm selfish. It looks like I'm lazy. Whatever it is that might come up, when really you were just like trying to be helpful and get the laundry, get everything done that you possibly could, but nobody saw those things that you did. So now there's a misunderstanding coming,
yes.
I'm just like, how many households have that kind of a conversation every day where it's like, what did you do? I even think with children.
Yes.
You think, what did you do today to clean your room? Even you tell a kid to go clean their room, right?
The other piece is the needs being met can impact relationships, because if you're constantly putting the needs of your partner above the needs of your own, you start to not realize what your own needs are. Yeah. But then if you don't know your needs, your partner is going to have no way of meeting the needs because you don't even know what they are. Yeah. So you're kind of setting your partner up for this ridiculous task of meeting needs when you don't even know what those are. And the unfortunate thing about that is that can lead to resentment and lead to miscommunication or unresolved feelings because you're constantly putting your partner's needs above your own. But then you realize, like, wait, where's the reciprocation here? Like, my needs aren't being met. Yeah. And then it's these unrealistic expectations of each other that are built in miscommunication or not communicating or just not knowing or having those conversations or understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes I think in a partnership or relationship, the other partner starts to make up for some of these things. Like this journey of this person that got sidetracked all day.
Another thing about ADHD is that there is a heavy genetic component.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So a lot of times with ADHD and diagnosis in adulthood is that what happens is that a child is diagnosed with ADHD. And because there's that genetic link with ADHD, then it's the look at the parents. Where did this come from? And then that's oftentimes when one or both parents also get a diagnosis of ADHD. Or like myself with my sister, I got diagnosed with ADHD. A couple months later, I was like, oh, I wonder if this is something I should share with my sister because maybe. Yeah. I did. And that day she was like, oh my gosh, my therapist just told me that she wants me to get screened for ADHD because she thinks I have ADHD. And I'm like, no way. Yeah. And then the fun thing was last week we were talking to my mom. Yeah. And my mom was like, well, I don't understand. Where do you guys think this ADHD thing came from? My sister and I just stared at her and then burst out laughing. And she's like, what? What are you guys? What? I don't understand. It's like, well, Mom, probably you at some point. And then we went through all the symptoms. She's like, oh my God, I do all these things. I'm like, well, yeah. Like, this isn't just coming out of nowhere.
But then when you talk like that too, when you look at, let's say even your kid, but you back it up all the way to your mom and even before, it just ends up becoming generational patterns.
Yes.
You just think, oh, it's so funny. Your mom used to do that thing and you do it too.
Yeah.
And maybe it is funny and it's harmless. But what about all those other things that aren't so funny and harmless that we just think are part of our family culture?
Yes.
Oh, my dad does this. My dad always forgets his keys. Oh, yeah, me too. And now my kid. But maybe there's something a little
wait
more
a second,
to
let's
that.
look into this. Yeah, and that's actually probably another reason for not diagnosing sooner is because parents are like, well, I do these things.
Yeah.
This is normal. This is regular life. This is how people exist.
Yeah.
Because you don't think to question it.
No.
Because either you're coping so well or things are going well. There's no explosions in your life. There's no reason to question it.
But I don't know about that because I think you're coping with it. You're right. And I think for a certain period of time, we all can do that.
Yep.
We all can share stories of how we've coped through something so well. However, I also think, like you said earlier, we're also humans and we feel and we wear that on us and we do internalize. And there are so many conversations we have with ourselves inside that no one knows. That I think we do break down. And I do think we can only, sometimes we'll say, well, I turned out fine. Well, we turned out fine. And okay, maybe I did turn out fine. Maybe you turned out fine. But like sometimes we want to be a little bit better than fine, or do we want to find out if that fine is a very low bar?
Yes.
Like maybe my fine is very low and I'm missing out on something.
Yes.
Could that,
maybe life doesn't have to be this hard every single day.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a reason why it's so hard. And maybe if I knew that reason, knew my brain and body in a different way, then life gets easier. It gets more manageable. It gets more understandable.
Right.
Then you can do something about it. But until you have that self-awareness, until you do take the time to look inward to address these things, maybe life doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's very well said. How can partners and loved ones better understand and support someone or the other if they are living with ADHD or going through the process of learning about, am I going to be diagnosed with this or not?
Compassion and curiosity. I think it's so important to go into every interaction, honestly, with every single human, with the mindset that they are doing the best they can with what they've got. And what they are doing isn't intentional to harm, that they're doing their best. They have the best intentions. And they're not trying to be an asshole. They're not trying to be this horrible human. That they don't know that they're doing something wrong. Yeah. But it's coming at it with curiosity, compassion, understanding, empathy, and just wanting to learn more.
That's very well said, I think. Thank you for that. I like that. I think I can just think of compassion. I think, man, I could drink more compassion juice for sure. Because I think what happens is whether you're someone that's experiencing these symptoms of ADHD and trying to figure this process out, or you're the partner or the loved one, I think it's just a frustrating place to be because you're trying to be compassionate. You're trying to be more open with each other, all these sorts of things, but it's hard to go through. And I think that's why sometimes people just don't bother going through it because it is scary. It is risky. It's the unknown.
Yes.
I already know that I can function living with something like this. Now, could it be scary if we have a change? And let's say we address it and there's a change. How's that change going to affect my household? Like, we don't always think it could be for the better. We think, what if it's worse than this?
Yes.
And I guess my question to you is someone who's gone through it, can it get better?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would never advocate for, the ostrich head in the sand approach to life because I've tried that. I've lived probably most of my life with that. If I ignore it, it'll go away mentality. And it worked. It did. It worked for so long until it didn't. Yeah. Until you break down, until you realize you can't do it all. Mm-hmm. This often comes after childbirth and having kids. was the other thing as I jump from topic to topic to topic.
You're doing good. You're doing really good.
But that is also a reason why women get diagnosed with ADHD later in life, is because they have developed these coping skills. They go through life. They know how to do it. They have these scripts. They can handle all of the things until you have kids. And kids suck. They're hard. They're unpredictable.
That's what we're naming the episode. It's about ADHD, but kids suck.
But they're so draining. And you as a mom, you have to put everything you have into these tiny humans. So then you're realizing that, oh my gosh, maybe I can't do all of the things. And you have to use different coping skills. You have to do different time management strategies. The things that you grew up coping with and the strategies you used no longer work. So then you're left feeling worthless, like a crappy mom. You can't complete basic tasks like dishes anymore. You can't use your brain like you used to. So then you feel like a failure. You feel like you're failing your kids. You're failing yourself. You can't do anything right. You're worthless. All of those things, where it's not. There's this very real thing that could be happening. So that's another reason, is because then women break down. They go to their doctor crying because they can't handle it. They can't do life. They're yelling at their kids. Things like lots of sensory issues is something we haven't talked about either. But lots of times too much noise or not enough noise is overstimulating, overwhelming. For me personally, chewing. I'm able to cope with it most of the time. If I haven't gotten enough sleep or if something else is going on, the sound of someone chewing. And my youngest every morning will be chewing her Cheerios and I just can't cope with it. Like I have to leave. I'm just like, I can't deal with this chewing. But things like that you don't even think are happening in your environment.
But somehow your brain's narrowing in on that sound.
Oh yeah. And then you can't stop thinking about it. And it's just like, it's infuriating. And that's another thing with moms, is that their babies, when they're whining or crying, it's unmanageable. It's so overwhelming because you don't know what you can do to help your baby sometimes. And then that makes you feel like a failure. But you can't manage the other people's feelings. You can't do the things that you would usually do with other people to help manage their emotions, to help bring it calm. Babies are babies. They'll be jerks to be jerks. They'll get their needs met in whatever way they can. And that's really hard too for that sensory overload, overstimulation. So you get moms yelling at kids or being more irritable or snappy with their partners. Which is not normally characteristic of them. So that's hard too.
Man, just like women, I just think what your body goes through from the minute you're born to this whole lifespan, and I'm not saying it's any less for a man or someone who identifies in the way that they do. I'm just talking about being a woman myself. You're talking about these milestone moments that women, that's what you're supposed to do, first of all, is have a baby. So God forbid that doesn't happen, as we know what that process is like. But for women that are having babies and your hormones are everywhere and you're figuring all this out, and often it just comes out like I've seen a lot of couples at that stage break up or even have divorce because something's not gelling in the way it did before kids. And some people find their groove back, but I've noticed with people that have not been able to, I wonder if there's something more there, a little more complicated, like you're saying, like, for example, ADHD or else, versus it just being, oh, she changed. Because that's what you hear. Like, oh, we had kids and she just changed. Or that woman is so different now. Or she came back to work from maternity leave and she's just a whole different person. She's not the same as she used to be. And you're like, well, fuck, man. Like
are we not allowed to be different? Are we not allowed to change?
You know, like you go through this hormonal thing and then you're saying even in your 40s, 50s, when women start going through it again.
Menopause, like you were saying.
And then these complicated mental health disorders may pop up. And the message here today is this happens and these things can happen and there is help. There are doctors, there are therapists like you, Ashley, people in your profession that are also personally experiencing it. So these mental health disorders aren't picking and choosing people. It's not because you belong to a certain economic status or a certain race. It's universal. These things happen, and there is help out there. And I think if people listening today are maybe connecting to some of the examples you're sharing, because you're doing such a good job. I'm literally vividly imagining all these people in the situation as you're talking. And I think if people are connecting to that, I think it really is always worthwhile, as you're saying, talk, reach out, call someone, reach out to us at MFU saying, can you put us in touch with a therapist? Psychology Today has a lot of therapists like Ashley on there that specialize in these complicated life issues and can help people make sense. Because we talked about recognizing, diagnosing, we've talked about relationships, but now that, let's say someone's diagnosed with ADHD, maybe we can talk a little bit more about meds, as well as what do you do? Because some people, as we talked about at the beginning, it can feel like you're on this journey to just, and I don't want to say just, but this journey to be diagnosed. And then for some people, it's a fix. I have it now. And now what?
And now I can fix it with medication.
That's right. But you mentioned earlier that's not always possible.
There's not possible at all.
Okay, it's not all.
It's a tool. It's a tool to manage the symptoms in a different way. It's a tool that works really well for some people and not so well for other people. There's different medications. I talked about stimulants. There's also non-stimulant medication that can help treat some symptoms of ADHD. It all depends.
Yeah.
But I think that's the importance of understanding yourself and understanding the specifics of you and how it makes sense to you, how you live with it, what kind of things you need. But then it's that therapy, or I'm a huge supporter of ADHD coaches as well. You don't need, because there's a lot of stigma around therapy and mental health supports. And if I'm going to therapy, then, there must be something really wrong with me. Or the ADHD side of things, it's not that bad. I don't want to waste the therapist's time. I don't want to burden someone else with my problems. There's other options. There's ADHD coaches. There's looking it up online. Like, yes, there's so much misinformation out there. But if you're listening to this today and you're like, oh my gosh, this is me. But I'm too anxious to go to my doctor. But I want to stop some of these symptoms, or I want things to get better. You can Google strategies for managing ADHD and try a couple of them. What works for one person won't for another. Something for me that really helps reduce symptoms every single day is making sure I exercise. Do I do that every day? No. Should I? Yes, because I know if I run 5 kilometers every morning, I will feel better. I will function better. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So,
because you're human.
Exactly. And I mean, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to have to remember to do those things. The structure and the routine and the remembering to brush your teeth every single day. It drives me nuts when people say, it's just like brushing your teeth. You don't even have to think about it. I do. I have to make the active choice to brush my teeth.
Because you can forget as well, hey? There's people that I know that have left the house as adults numerous times in a week being like, shit, I forgot to put my deodorant on, or I forgot to brush my teeth.
Yes. I have my one friend who also struggles with this, and I'll get to work and I'm like, fuck, I forgot to brush my teeth today. And she's like, I have 3 toothbrushes in my car, at my work, deodorant too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, it's because you don't do things in order. Lots of people, which blows my mind, they get up, they go to the bathroom, they have a shower, they they do the same thing every single morning.
I'm going to put my hand up.
You do that?
Literally, from the minute my alarm goes off,
you know exactly.
I have from the bathroom to the tea to the workout to the shower, like all of that. Maybe there's a couple of things, like I'll floss before I brush or whatever, but it's always very, my keys and stuff go in particular places. Again, sometimes I forget and put them in the wrong place, but often it's in the same place. So some of the things you're saying, because I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I know people very well That is like the day. And then it's like, even like in the morning, like you said, starting off, like now you forgot to brush your teeth, or you had to, like you said, the example of walking back inside 6 times. It's like you're already set up for failure in some ways. And you're maybe bringing that into the workplace or the next place you're going because you're irritated that, oh, I'm an idiot or whatever dialogue you have in your head. And so like that would carry over, right?
Well, now I'm late and all.
Yeah, right. All those things as well. But it's possible to forget that. So I think that's interesting. So some strategies that you said work for you. Physical activity is one thing.
Structure and routine is another strategy that works for everyone with ADHD. Everyone in life, structure, routine.
Yeah.
But people with ADHD need it. But it's very hard to do because you want to fight against it. You want things to be novel and exciting and different every single day. So you can do a routine structure for a certain amount of time, but it'll get boring.
Yes.
So then you blow it up and you do something different because it needs to be shiny and new. Right. Different things like that, which is fine. But build that into the routine. Say, this will be my routine for this month. Next month, I get to do something different. You can do things like that. For me, I need to make my calendar very colorful. When I'm adding every single thing I need to do with my life, I put different colors in it. I have 8,000 reminders on my phone to brush your teeth, take your medication. I need to put that in my phone to remind me every single day to take my medication. Because if it's not there, I don't do it. But then I get blind to that notification and I just ignore it. So then I have to set it at a different time or do a different ringtone or do different things so that it's novel so I don't ignore it.
Yeah.
So different things like that. And then it gets exhausting.
Yeah.
And then you're tapped out at the end of the day and you don't want to communicate. That's another relationship thing.
Yeah.
Is that you're done peopling, but then you have people that need you to still people.
Totally. Well, and I've talked to people that work in sort of the builders industry. And so I was talking to a few months ago, I had this little meeting that I was part of, and he's an owner of some construction company. And he was saying too, like in that field, it's such a stressful job in terms of the physical work and the hours and these kinds of things. And a lot of people, he would say in his field don't have the communication skills. And I think that's many of us, whether we're in the mental health field or not, like everyone can suck at communicating.
Yes.
We can always be better. So, but he was saying it becomes difficult. And so some people would go home and the routine of drinking or other substances. And that is where they would see a lot of relationship issues because you've had a rough day at work and now you don't want to communicate or even know how to.
Or can't,
And so when I was talking to him, I started thinking about that too, that like that is like for a lot of people, it's like transitions.
Yes.
It's going from one thing to another. And for a lot of people, when you walk in at the end of the day, I think it's valid to ask myself, what does that 5 minutes look like when I walk in? Is it successful? Is it the same pattern where no one says hi or we get mad at each other right away? I see the mess in the house, or we all have things that happen. Some people, I got to go wash my face, change my clothes. Like everyone has their thing.
Yep.
So I think it's helpful. And I'm hearing that from you today too, is that taking that time for what is happening in these patterns, whether it's with my partner, my workplace, my own self, these like, okay, I keep putting these reminders on my phone. However, I'm not following them. What is that? Do I need to start a new routine, as you're saying? So it's not always going to be the same thing. Should you be diagnosed with ADHD and moving forward, you have it all figured out, there's got to be trial and error.
Yes.
And changing it for some, like you need to change these things up for yourself.
Yeah. And it's going to be different experience for every single human out there as life is, but it's figuring out what works and what doesn't for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes in that moment, in that day.
Yeah.
Because it can and will change from day to day.
Yeah.
So I think that's another message that I want people to hear and understand and absorb is that self-compassion. Not feeling like you have to be perfect all the time, holding yourself to these unrealistic standards that no one can possibly meet. Like being kind to yourself. And minimizing that negative self-talk or that I feel worthless or helpless or useless or nobody cares, nobody loves me. All of those internal things. Be kind to yourself, because you're not doing yourself any favors by not showing that compassion, that self-care, that self-awareness.
Right.
You're doing yourself a disservice. You're forgetting about yourself. And that's really the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you're not there for yourself, you can't be there for other people.
Well, it's that whole oxygen mask thing that they tell us about in the airplane, like literal lifesaver, right? You can die or pass out. So put yours on before you go help the other person. And I always think that's a good reminder of life in order to help this other person and to help them do well. How do I fill my bucket or do the things that I need to do to take care of myself?
Absolutely.
But I know it gets tricky for people, like you said, all sorts of complicating reasons about why people pick others before themselves.
Yes.
Right. And we're taught to do that as women in particular. That's why you gotta go see the Barbie movie. Oh my gosh. Anything else in the medications and treatment options or strategies that you want to add?
I think just that big message of this isn't a cure. It's not that you pop a pill, you hop on the treadmill and you're cured.
Right.
Like this is something that you're going to live with. And if you don't want to seek out a diagnosis, that's fine. That doesn't mean everything's going to disappear either. Yeah. So either way, the diagnosis itself, it really doesn't matter. It's the understanding yourself and doing things different, figuring out what works, what doesn't. The diagnosis, talking to a medical professional, your doctor, can open the door to medications if you so choose. For me, yes, medications have been successful. But for me, it was more of the identity side of things. The aha moment of, okay, this makes sense. Another thing I didn't realize that regular people don't do is rearrange the furniture in their house frequently. I actually assumed that this is something that people do often.
Didn't you do that with your office a lot?
I do it all the time.
I remember you would move stuff around in your office all the time.
It's different. I just get this urge. I'm sitting in a room and I'm like, this has to be different now. And then once it's in your mind, you have to do it. There's nothing else that's more important than doing that in that moment. Yeah. But I didn't realize that that's not a typical thing that people do until I got this diagnosis. And I'm like, oh, that's what that is.
Right.
You know, or just different things that I just thought were regular.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's not detrimental. It's not like that's an issue.
Yeah.
But it's just these different ways of understanding yourself that it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. And I think also that example is very cute about rearranging the furniture. I think even for me, I would want to know, it's not the end of the world that I rearrange my furniture, but when do I do it? Like, why do I do it because I don't want to do the other thing I'm supposed to do? That's maybe I have anxiety over that I probably should be putting that attention to. So I think that can be helpful as well, as if I'm doing it because it's the change and I got inspired by a HGTV show and somebody had a nice way to design a room. Great. Okay, awesome.
It's usually more planned, less impulsive. You think about it more than just that second of it came into my head, I have to do it right now.
That's just it. And if I don't do it, then what? Like, there's just no other option?
Think it and it will consume my life until it's done.
So that's what happens, hey? Mm-hmm. So if I had said to you, no, Ashley, you can't rearrange your office right now. We have to go do this other thing. Let's say even at your home. Like, how would you?
That would be very hard to cope with. And obviously it has to happen sometimes, but then those are the times that I would probably be more irritable, resistant to hearing other people's opinions. That's when more of those negative behavioral traits might come out, or snippiness, or lack of focus, because that's all I can think about is rearranging the furniture. Yeah. So then I'm only hearing parts of what other people are saying, or I'm not getting the full picture, or I'm more likely to misunderstand.
Yeah. See, and what I like about what you're saying right now too is that not only is it important to know when do I do this, but what happens when I can't do it.
Yeah.
Because that's a really good point, is you can't always rearrange the furniture right now.
No.
And okay, what are you going to do? Or if you prioritize that you that's what you're going to do and you're going to miss your friend's wedding or whatever, then what's the consequence or the response of trying to think that out? Is that, you know what I mean? Like just maybe those are good examples, I think, of figuring out how do I cope with this thing or deal with this thing that I do over here in lieu of the thing I should be doing.
Exactly. And while you were talking, I was thinking about stigma again of ADHD. And the stigma of ADHD is often a big barrier for people getting diagnosed. Because I think a big stigma is that if you have ADHD, that means that you're dumb.
Yeah.
That means that you're not smart. And that's such a common misconception because ADHD has no connection to intelligence. There is no correlation to having ADHD and having a lower IQ. And there's some really interesting studies that are coming out that's actually linking ADHD in women to giftedness.
Oh, interesting.
And there's lots of little girls. This is another reason for misdiagnosis in girls is because, no, they're too smart.
Yeah.
They do too well in school. They can't possibly have ADHD. They're gifted.
Yeah.
Well, no, that doesn't mean they don't have ADHD. So there's lots of studies coming out about that, linking ADHD in girls and women to giftedness. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those.
Can you help us understand, if maybe those of us that don't understand, what do we mean when we say being gifted?
Oh, like intellectual IQ of above average.
Like a Steve Jobs.
Sure. I don't know what his is. Yeah. Or like a Elon Musk. I'm assuming he would probably have a big IQ or
AI level smart.
Yeah. Well, and getting back to your question too about the success.
Right.
Is that a lot of women with ADHD are doctors, are psychiatrists, are in these incredible fields. A lot of the STEM work, like the science and math and all of those, the innovations, those, because ADHD isn't a death sentence. It's not all of these awful things. Like having the diagnosis of ADHD also means that you think outside the box. You're super creative. The impulsivity makes you fun to be around. You can change and adapt on a dime. Like you have all of these different abilities to do all of these amazing things. It doesn't mean that, you're just always forgetful and a drag on society. Right.
You're just still running back and forth from your car into the house.
Yes, sometimes, but then it often brings out all of these great things that are also often not thought about or not talked about as much.
And thanks for that, because I think it is important to talk about how can people with ADHD still thrive.
Yes.
And you're doing a really nice job sharing some success stories and even little inspirations about, you don't thrive any less if you have something like ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what would you tell someone that maybe is listening today that is being bogged down by the stigma and are afraid to go seek help, afraid to reach out and go through a process of figuring out, do I have something like ADHD or not?
You don't need to suffer alone. Go get help. Talk to someone. Don't keep trying to squeeze yourself into a mold that was never built for you. Mm-hmm. You don't need to train yourself to be neurotypical. It is okay to be neurodivergent. There's nothing wrong with you or about that. It's a different way of being, and that's okay.
I like that. Thank you for that. I think my other question would be, what would you go, maybe you've already done this, but what would you go back and tell younger Ashley that was living with symptoms of ADHD, but had to kind of deal with it and shun and sort of describe that story of a little girl that was, sit down, be quiet, do your thing. She's fine. She's fine. What would you go back and say to that little girl?
Oh my gosh. All of the things. Oh man. That I would want to tell her that you belong, that you are okay, that there is nothing wrong with you. You deserve love and worth and respect for who you are, not for what you think other people want you to be. You can be quirky, you can be crazy, you could be weird, and that's okay. Just be you.
Well said. Very well said. Okay, so I'm just gonna, is there anything we want to cover?
Well, I think just the hope, and I think we're seeing it in society, this acceptance of neurodivergence, and different people have different needs. So I think we're already starting to see these shifts and changes in society, the way we talk about mental health in general. And I think that is helping and working. But there's a lot of things that schools and our education, I'm not even going to get into that, but it's not built for kids with ADHD. That the workplace often isn't. You sit here in this desk, do this thing until you're done. Like there are these structures in society that aren't built for neurotypical brains. And yes, there's definitely structure, routine, all of those things needed. But I think there's a place for more flexibility, more acceptance of, hey, Kieran, my boss, I need to rearrange this furniture right now. Can you give me 10 minutes? And I will be right there and you will have my full attention. You will have 100% of me. That's okay if it can't. But then there's that acceptance of you're probably only going to be getting 50% of me. And is that okay? But just these different understandings and different opportunities to open up these conversations to allow people the freedom to not feel like they have to mask, not feel like they have to hide, that people care and accept and will make some considerations for them that help, that make people succeed. Like this, getting rid of this idea of this 40-hour work week, 8-hour days. I would have thrived a lot more if I did 3 hours when I'm on, and then my brain stops working. So I'm not going to work for the next 3 hours. But then when it comes back on, you're going to get the best work. And trusting it will get done. Yeah. Just not in those confinements.
Well, that's just it. Is the work getting, what are the things that need to get done? And I know some jobs you need to do task A to B to C, but probably people with ADHD would be in those careers. Maybe they found a way to thrive. It sounds like there's so many unique ways. Yeah. But I think that's just it. It's just like even society with, you have to go to college, you have to get married, you have to have babies. And then when you're at work, it's like it's Monday to Friday, 40 hours. And I think COVID was a really interesting example. Like you said at the beginning, I loved COVID. And I get part of it was you didn't have to interact with people, but part of your job also allowed you to work from home. Yep. And I think you probably, I would imagine, I know when I worked from home, there were things that were really difficult to do that I had to do in the office. And then there were things that allowed me to get done and take my moments and whatever I needed to do.
What needs to get done? Is it being done?
How do we prioritize? Yeah, exactly. But the point I'm hearing you make today is taking the time for yourself and recognizing of the things that are going on in my life, the things that I'm part of, are they working for me and how are they serving me?
Yes.
And if they're not, and I keep coming back, we talk about what is a definition of, you want to talk about insanity, it's doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expecting different results. So if I'm forgetting to brush my teeth every day and that's impacting me a lot and messing up the rest of my day because I'm thrown off, it's worth me looking into why am I forgetting, what's that about?
And that self-awareness piece.
Right.
But you can also not brush your teeth every single day and it not be an issue. And that's also fine.
That's true.
It doesn't mean
just don't kiss me.
Right? Yeah. I'll shoot. Fine, I'll brush my teeth every day. Ugh, these demands. Just in case Kieran is there.
Hey man, that would impact a relationship.
Right?
Right? If my partner is constantly forgetting or choosing to not brush. I draw my line of brushing teeth. But I hear what you're saying though. Like if that's working for you,
then that's fine.
Then that's fine. Yeah.
There's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's only if these things are impacting you, if there's an issue with it, if you want something to be different, then go ask, get more information. That's fine. Yeah. If it's not, then that's fine too. Totally. It doesn't mean that these things are an issue for everyone.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to ask you another thing. What would you say to those folks that maybe are listening that have someone they really care a lot about that they think maybe are exhibiting these symptoms, or that person they care a lot about has been bringing up in subtle ways that maybe there's something wrong. Maybe, have you heard of this thing called ADHD? Maybe I have it. However, maybe aren't doing something in terms of going to find out more about it or talking to the doctor. What would you say to those? How can they be helpful and supportive? I know you talked about compassion and empathy. Is there something that loved ones can do to help?
The only thing that's coming to mind is blurt it out bluntly. That's my ADHD. Let's call the doctor. Let's make an appointment. Yeah, and I do think that there does need to be the sensitivity around it too, because I know me and a lot of people with ADHD, it's that need to be perfect. It's that perfectionism. It's that people pleasing. And you get so entrenched in that idea, and that's your identity. The more productive I am, the more worthy I am. And you get stuck in these mindsets of having to be perfect, that if someone came to me 10 years ago and said, hey, I think you have ADHD, I could have responded probably differently or offensive or cut that person out of my life.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. So, there's that sensitivity around, you might be blowing up someone's entire identity or sense of self. So it's doing it in smaller, more kind ways of, hey, I've noticed these things. I listened to this podcast. I read this thing. It kind of sounds like you. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Are there some of these, like I related to a couple of that? What do you think?
Right.
And just bringing it up in different playful, kind, caring, sensitive ways, in less of a in your face, like there's something wrong with you. Yeah.
You should diagnose
all of the issues that I don't like about you. Yeah. I think it's ADHD.
I listened to a podcast today and you do all these terrible things.
All of these things wrong.
If you just change it. Yeah. So what about for people that are in a relationship and maybe feel like they want to explore the path of possibly being diagnosed with ADHD, but they have a partner that isn't supportive of it or is like, you're fine, it's okay. Do you really have it? We're all fine. What would you say to those people listening that are like, this may impact my relationship? Yeah, maybe my family, maybe my boss will fire me. I can't bring it up. So what do we do in those?
Those are that's real possibilities.
That's also a human rights violation. So let's make sure. Yeah,
but there is that stigma of, if people know this part about me, will they think about me different? Those things can happen. But you have to understand that you don't get to control the way that people are going to respond to this. So yeah, it might bring up something in your relationship. And if that's something you're worried about, go to your doctor, talk about therapy. Go to couples counseling, because if this is a concern, if you're actually worried that your partner won't understand or accept you or minimizes those very important parts of you, then there's a bigger need for more conversations in your relationship, because you should be in a relationship where you feel loved and cared about and supported no matter what. Yeah. And anxiety, depression, ADHD, no matter what it is, if you're not feeling safe and secure in your relationship, then get help. Get support from a therapist, from a mental health professional about, how do I navigate these conversations? Maybe we'll bring my partner in. Maybe we can talk about this together, because they might just not understand. They might need to hear it in a different way from someone else about the severity, what this means. They might not know. Yeah. They might not be doing it to minimize or to be a jerk. They just might be unaware. Yeah. And maybe the things or the way you're describing it or explaining it just aren't getting to them. Right. So different conversations, not assuming the worst too. And giving your partner the opportunity to have their opinion and their view, because it might not be what you're assuming it's going to be. Giving them the opportunity.
Right. Because, maybe they're worried about something that they can't quite communicate, articulate. Yes. And there's always something more to chip away at.
Yeah. Never assume.
Yeah. Because that makes an ass out of you.
And me.
Yeah. Do you remember like the first time you put that together or heard that from someone? I was like, that is so genius.
This is amazing.
I know, right?
My life has changed.
Yes. Really did that day. I agree. Yeah. Okay. So I just at this point want to thank you for coming on. And I know I've asked a lot of questions about recognizing and diagnosing, about challenges, some strategies, relationships, medications. You've shared some success stories. You've talked about your own story. Is there anything here that maybe I didn't ask that you wish I had or that you want to bring up?
I don't think so.
Okay, so then my question for you is, I'd like you to leave something for our listeners. What's one thing that, if it's the only thing that they take from this episode, what would you want that one thing to be?
This is going to sound obscure, but this last part that we've been talking about, I'm sure most people have seen it. It's that image of a couple animals and a tree, and this fish being expected to climb a tree.
Mm.
And if we're judging a fish's ability to climb a tree, they will always fail because fish don't climb trees. So if that's our barometer, if that's what we're judging a fish by, yes, it will fail. However, if we start seeing the fish for the abilities that it can do, it can swim, it can breathe underwater, all of these great things, then we're going to see the fish as a success. Mm-hmm. So don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
That was very well said.
As that relates to ADHD.
Very well said. Okay, so if folks are curious about, I've mentioned they can go on Psychology Today, look up Ashley Jones. They will find you there and know how to have access to you. Opportunity for you to share as well. Where can people find you outside of Psychology Today?
Yes, my private practice is called Evolve Counseling Services. So you can go onto my website, evolvecounselingservices.ca. My email address, evolvecounselingservices@outlook.com. Yep, you can find me. All of those are listed on Psychology Today as well.
Perfect. And for everyone listening, these conversations we say are door openers. So if there's anything about today's topic that interests you, that you're curious about, or maybe you want to add on, you know where to find me. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Before we end, let's do these affirmations that we started in the last few episodes. So you can randomly get to pick one and then you get to write me a little note later and I'll hang them up. So what did you get?
Take time today to check on yourself.
How fitting is that for today's episode?
Exactly. That one's fantastic.
I like that. That's really good. I got take it slow. Yeah. I thought that was funny. I like that.
Yeah.
I could use that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I'm
good.
sure you can.
So we're gonna go away for the weekend. So this is a perfect opportunity to just, wrap up and take it slow. So yeah, I love that. Okay, one more time. I just want to thank you, Ashley, for coming on, spending the time with me. I have a feeling about this episode. I think this topic is on a lot of people's minds. So I know I'm going to get a lot of feedback. And my guess is that you are going to be a return guest very soon. So
you.
Well, you just wait and see when I start sending you all the feedback that's coming through. So just wait. Sure.
Well, thank you for having me on today. And this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, that I really enjoy talking about. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so.
Of course.